미사도 7시에 오픈을 나왔어요.
근데 오늘 왜 이렇게 하나도 안 이렇게 논스톱으로 왔어요, 여기까지?
아니, 이게 괜찮으신가요?
네.
아, 왜 이렇게 정신이 어떻게. 나 방도 다 잡아놨어. 거기서 먹었어. 야, 얘들 그거 좀 심하다. 그게 촬영이시고, 그거 하니까.
그거를 했어야 되는데도 전에 시작했네, 그죠?
아, 그런 거 당연하지 하시죠. 당연하죠.
어디 방문하기도 좋고 사람 만나기도 좋고.
돌고 있어. How do you pronounce your last name? SCHIEB. SCHIEB. Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. Oh, and it's the lead. I guess I have to have a name tag.
Monday.
Monday, yes.
I think I left Monday and
Arrived
arrived Tuesday morning.
I see, okay.
Yes.
So you came from...
Direct stop flight from Paris.
Going the other way is only about 10 hours. Coming this way takes longer.
It's always
Because of
Nice to meet you.
We'd like to write emerging policy issues for the next 20 or 30 years. So we are discussing about every fields or sector
issues.
Exactly.
You have a consulting company, is that it?
Well, two things. First, I am professional futurist, so I have a consulting company, and right now I'm also the president of the World Future Studies Federation, and for the current term, which is 2005-2009. So I'm trying to do both. I'm from UNESCO. Yes, because we are officially recognized by UNESCO with a specific status with them. So every 2 years we have a grant from them to lead project. So what is your first name, Mr. Nam or Mr. Su?
This is my first name, this is my last name. Su is my last name.
So you are Mr. Su.
Right, it's kind of confusing.
Yes, for us it's really confusing.
Yeah, here when you read newspaper, they normally write the way Koreans would say, which would start out with so Nam-Pyo.
The first is a family name.
Yeah, right, that's the way it is. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning, Su, how are you?
I'm Salmi.
Fabienne Goux-Baudiment. Nice to meet you.
Meet you.
SCHIEB.
They want to take a picture of us, we should stand together somewhere. Maybe you should stand in the middle here, let me see us.
So speak with how about this forum?
죄송합니다. 총재, 이분이 키가 크시니까 총장님하고 자리를 좀 바꾸셔야 돼요. 죄송합니다.
You and I should change it.
Okay.
총장님이 좀 제스처 하시면 여기 이쪽 보시 말씀 좀 해주시죠.
어떻게?
뭐 얘기하세요, 오늘 대답. Newspaper, that's funding this forum, so.
So the
그래,
Oh, you know everything, eh?
it's the second time there, so I try to learn. In the futurists cannot teach, so they have just to learn.
I'll sit over here so I can look at my computer. It's the best university in the world. It is a university, sort of like MIT of the Koreans. So if you think of it that way, just about it. Organizationally, quality of students and quality of faculty is about the same as MIT.
Which way you would get that to?
Yeah, right. So I think they're all work out. And so let me just introduce for the purpose of the recording here that we have Dr. Fabienne Goux-Baudiment. I almost had it before.
Goux-Baudiment.
Goux-Baudiment. Okay. Okay. And she is the president of World Future Studies Federation, and she also is heading up a consulting company in the area of futures research. And Dr. Jamil Salmi is with the World Bank, and he's dealing with the tertiary education, and he is coordinator of the program at the World Bank. And then Dr. Pierre-Alain SCHIEB SCHIEB, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And he's a counselor in the advisory unit to the Secretary General of OECD and head of OECD Futures Project. The title that's given to us to discuss this morning might be translated as being Search for an Educational Model in Global Age. So they are asking us what kind of education model we should have in the global age. This topic is somewhat related to a topic we discussed at Lyon colloquium in June of this year.
Luc Weber.
You were there?
No, but I know Luc Weber.
Oh, I
He
see.
organized it.
So yeah. In fact, he emailed this morning from Luke saying that now the book is ready. So the book will cost $35, but they're offering us at half price, $17.50. So I ordered 30 copies to distribute to people here in Korea. The colloquium dealt with this topic. The colloquium dealt with what globalization implies in terms of future of higher education. So that's the topic we discussed for 3 days, and here we're going to do it in 1 hour. So you can see that we'll be much more efficient. And but Lyon was a very beautiful town, so it was well worth spending 3 days there. But anyway, this is also a nice hotel. So anyway, I thought the questions we should address are the following. What's the problem? Why do we have to even talk about this issue of having educational model in this global age? So it implies that there's something different about what future educational model ought to be from the way they used to be. So that is question number one. Question number two is for whatever problem you think we need to deal with, what do we propose ought to be done to deal with this issue? So that's the second question that I could think of. Third is, what would be the consequence of just continuing to be on current path? So if you don't make any changes, European universities run the way they used to, US universities run the way they used to, and Korean universities run the way they used to, what would be the bad thing, or what would be the consequences of not making changes? And fourth, what about human resource issues in poor countries? We are all talking about human resource in fairly well advanced countries, but how about all those poor countries? What do we do? Are we going to leave them behind, or what are the issues? What do we need to do? I think that's one of the things we should think about. And the fifth question is, who is going to pay for this improvement in education? And World Bank maybe, right? But I'm not sure if World Bank will pay for the education in Korea or US or Europe. And finally, the question I thought about is, what should this global HR forum recommend as a result of this gathering? So is there something that we're going to leave behind as a message to the world? So these are the questions I thought about. I'm sure that you all will have different thoughts and format that was given to me to follow. And I'm not sure if we need to follow this precisely, but the format they gave us is that each one of you should say whatever you have in mind for 5 or 10 minutes, and they will chew up 30 minutes, and then afterwards there will be some just discussions, and then finally some concluding remarks. So anyway, I think perhaps I should give the Fabienne the honor of being the first presenter with the thoughts this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think the topic of my contribution this afternoon, so
okay.
I'm well prepared for it. I think that the real question is why we are here about talking about education. It means that we have a crisis. If you have no crisis, you do not need to think about the change. So the reason of the crisis, from my point of view, is mainly because we have an obsolete model of university, and we have the second point, which is we have an alien generation, and third, we have challenges ahead, new challenges ahead. The first thing is that our current model of university has been originated from the Humboldt model the German model from the 19th century. And at that time, the idea was to bring together both teaching and researching. Before that, researching was in academies, and universities were only dedicated to teaching. Then Humboldt decided, well, at that time with good reason, much probably, to bring them together in order to have a better kind of, I would say, altogether teaching and researching. The idea was to provide kind of homogeneous class of scientists and scholars. Well, this class has become with time, I would say, kind of mandarinal class. I mean, something that is just close of itself, completely, I would say, inert, with inertia, large inertia in it. I mean, professors, as they are being made by the system, are now kind of something between a guru and a diva. Once they have shown their capability once, for the rest of their life, they will stay professor, even if their content is totally obsolete and their pedagogy is just non-existent. So I think the first crisis is within the system itself. So definitely I think we have to change it. Already we have diverse model now, the American one, European one, and I don't know very much about the Asian one, but perhaps we have another one here. This would be the first thing. We have to face now mass education, increasing complexity, and definitely we cannot accept to continue to see the world only through one lens, the lens of hyper-specialization. We have to have a much broader view of the future and start to think or go beyond the thinking, the short-term thinking, to go to the very long-term thinking in a holistic way, systemic way, etc. So I think that definitely we need to change not only the model itself of university in terms of organization and so on, but also in terms of content and what university should really provide human resources of the future. Second point would be about, well, you mentioned the fact that we would like to see another model. But I don't think that we have to imagine the model per se. The model has to follow what we want for the future. I mean, what we want our new generations, the next generation, to know and to behave. And this is also something about values and about a more global approach of the future. So, for me, the perverse approach would be to imagine the system before imagining the goal and the real aim. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have a lot of comments to make on many things you said. In fact, all those are very relevant topics for discussion. And Korean model is somewhat like American model. And as you may know, the top 15 universities in the world today are all in the U.S., except two, Cambridge and Oxford maybe.
In Tokyo.
No, I don't put Tokyo in there. I think Tokyo is pretty much like the university that she described. And I think it's somewhat obsolete. They don't have graduate school in Japan because people don't go to graduate school. And if you look at the quality of the students at University of Tokyo, they are pretty low level. And so we'll discuss that later. I'm a fellow of Tokyo University, so I should be kind to Tokyo, but I think that's the fact. They will agree with you. That agree with me as to what they, what their problems are. They're trying to change, and they're having problems. So, would you like to go next?
Yes. It's one for the past 60 or 50 years, but we are not sure. You have to discuss about other potential wild cards or different scenarios. And so there is implications also in the fact that if globalization is not here to stay, you could have also a different kind of situation in the future, even if it is for a kind of temporary situation. So I'm afraid that everyone is this is taken for granted, but you may think about other situations where you would have a more fragmented world and return to some kind of regional approaches, or regional policies, or even national policies, or something like that. So the second important trend is, of course, demographics. But demographics, this is not just absolute numbers, going from 6 to 9 billion. It's also urbanization process, aging population. So this is another important trend that you have to take into account. And if I limit myself to maybe 3 or 4, the third one is, of course, that we tend to have a lot of technology-driven assumptions, so that the pace of change is going to be so influential on the economic and social developments in the future, which could be also something to be challenged, because many of the promises of the technologies brought in the 70s or 80s, they have never seen the light of the day. So you have a lot of expectations from the science and technology standpoints, and many, if not most of them, are not to be on the market for 3, 4, 5 or more decades. So I'd just like to point out about the last one. We have covered a number of new technology. Also, this is one, space, civil and commercial applications targeting 2030, where you are in this realm of answering the challenges, that the world is having to cope with, and also technology-driven up to a certain extent, field. But we had also more recently something on infrastructure to 2030, covering surface transportation, not air transport or maritime, but surface transportation, energy, telecom, water, And in the past, we had also, before those 2 or 3 projects, we have had also something about risk management, how to cope with not only natural disasters, climate change, but technological accidents, and also new technologies, or even pandemics, infectious disease, threats from terror, and things like that. So a kind of broad approach, a holistic approach about risk management. So what you could say is that regarding education in tertiary education or lifelong learning, that from all the 3 major trends, you could derive lessons for higher education. And of course, what we see is there is no such a thing as one model, and it could be also different options. So if you take the notion of even technology-driven dimensions, you see that you have to at least adapt the way universities are organizing the curricula. And for instance, risk management is a very interesting concept, because it's across all disciplines. So either it's linked to new technologies, or it's linked to social unrest, or it's linked to precautionary principle, and so forth. So you have to have either something that is addressing risk management to all the students, and also specialist people. So it's both interdisciplinary if you think about substance, but also you need a lot of more experts in the field. And the same would apply to bioeconomy. Now we are in the middle of a project on bioeconomy. Will there be such a thing as an economic driver and social driver? And you see exactly the same, that the number of students going into science and technology is slightly increasing in absolute number, but declining in relative numbers, in almost all fields. So this is a problem of skill shortages for the future. So it's not just higher education, it's how do you fit the process of higher education institution with not only the right content and method, but also the pool of students.
Thank you. I guess it's your turn now, you're the last.
Not sure there is much to add, but if I will try, coming back to some of the points that Fabienne made at the beginning, what is wrong with university today? First thing is that many universities are driven by the professors. So the course, the curriculum, it's what the professors like, what they are familiar with, what they're comfortable with. And I think one of the revolutionary shifts we need is to start focusing on the learner, on the student, and the needs of the student. But as we try to do that, we are faced with a big challenge, is that as the economy transforms itself much rapidly, we don't know what the jobs of tomorrow are going to be. I mean, if you look at, in the US, for example, today, on top of the job ads, you will find webmaster, which didn't exist until 1993. So many of the jobs for which we want to prepare youngsters today we haven't defined them. So I think we need a shift away from the traditional content to what I would call methodological skills, so that people, as they move through their professional career, are able on their own to adapt themselves and to learn and relearn. And these are the skills such as being allowed to be more creative, being able to work in teams, and not only teams of people from your own culture, but maybe virtual teams of people from other countries. I know MIT, for example, is re-engineering its own program, undergraduate program, moving away from an approach where you would start with a theory and then gradually go into application. They start now with problem solving from day one, and see as they go, they learn the theoretical dimensions that are needed to go into that direction. You raised this point about technology. I think I agree with you that many promises have not been delivered. At the same time, I do believe that in education we've been very timid in embracing technologies. If you compare medicine and education, the medical doctor today works in a very different way from 20, 30 years ago. He or she has many more supports, advanced technology to help with the diagnosis or curative treatment. But in education, many professors, especially in developing countries, but I think still in many advanced countries, they still teach in the same way as they taught. We've taught in the past 200 years, perhaps 1,000 years, with the blackboard. And I think my hope is with our children, because they are much more familiar and adventurous with the way we harness technology. One of the questions you raised, Mr. Chairman, was why do we need to change also? I think we are on a collision course at both ends of the spectrum. If you take the poor countries, they are also confronted with the need to harness science and technology, so they cannot afford not to develop their higher education system, but they don't have the resources, the enrollments are still very low. At the other end of the system, you see in the US that the cost of higher education is rising. Just yesterday I was reading that again the cost of tuition was twice the cost of inflation. And if you look at countries like your own countries, Korea or Japan or Taiwan, with a demographic evolution, that means that you would have every year less youngsters coming out of the system. So we're in systems that are highly developed, where you have many institutions where some of them will have to close down, you will need more mergers, you will need to rethink whether your higher education institutions are mainly for youngsters or are they for adults who need to be retrained. And that brings us to the question of financing. And I think that many countries will need to face, and it's true for Western Europe and for many developing countries where we work, they need to face the need for more cost sharing, for more involvement of the realm of enterprise to participate in the funding of higher education, and even the state in terms of the the lifelong learning vision. There is a proposal in the US, for example, that every graduate will have a competitiveness account, a sort of a learning account where the graduate and the state and the enterprises will contribute so that we can fund the lifelong education. And lastly, I think one of the, reflecting on why we are here at this Global Human Resource Forum, I think one of the great benefits is that there are many people from different, coming with different perspectives and experiences, and we are able to share our experiences. And I think that learning is not a question of copying what KAIST is doing or what any other institution or country is doing, but trying to learn some of the principles and see whether they can be applied. I know, for example, for us, working in developing countries, looking at the example of China and how they have revolutionized the funding of higher education with tuition fees for everybody, but with scholarships and student loans to protect students from low income. And when we say that it comes from socialist country like China, although I don't know how much socialism there is still in China, but at least it's much more powerful than going to another developing country to tell them, look, a country that has changed so rapidly, this is what they've done in terms of the financing patterns.
Well, thank you. All you made very important and interesting comments. Let me retrace back and some of the things you have said, sort of give you my input to this. I think education as such cannot be discussed in singular terms because there are many different kinds of education, secondary education, tertiary education. Even in a tertiary education area, there is the distinction between massification, teaching large number of people, having to learn people. At the same time, we do need specialists, we do need leaders. So the model that you talked about in terms of this old German education model, that's, I think, true largely in Europe. That's not true in the US. In the US, research universities are needed because many people now get their graduate education. In order to teach graduate students, you do need to have research component. Kid now, they'll go to Google and then get the information they need, and then so that's affecting how people learn. I learned about the modern physics from my 11-year-old grandson because he was writing a term paper, and I was very impressed by the quality of the paper. So these kind of information, how quickly students can get to information, I think is affecting education quite a bit. At the same time, I think there's a difference between learning and understanding. Large number of schools are engaged in teaching and learning, and ultimately, for someone to be a leader in whatever field, they have to acquire certain understanding. And I think that's where I think education often falls apart and is not being very effective. A couple of things that perhaps you don't understand about especially Korea and Asia and in general. And then let me go back to the US side and see what it all implies. In Korea, investment in education is very large. It's education that's done outside of formal public education system. All the kids here go to school early in the morning, like 7 in the morning, ungodly hour 7, and they study until midnight to get into good schools. That's a system, which is, to me, is not a very healthy system because it's really not a good way of educating, especially if you want kids to understand the subject matters. So anyway, that's the system. And then 84% of high school graduates in Korea go to college, 84%. And I think that's, in some ways, maybe very high, too high maybe. The other statistics that you may be interested in knowing is that number of engineers produced in Korea is exactly the same as number of engineers produced in the US. Did you know that? 70,000 engineers they produce. So in Korea they are talking about declining interest in science, technology, and so forth. But the total sheer number is amazing. It's 70,000, the same as in the US. And Korean economy is much smaller than the US economy, yet Korea is producing the same number. So those statistics may help. One of the things that very unique in terms of what happened in the latter half of the 20th century is a migration of brains. if you look at the U.S. universities, especially in science and engineering, I think it's less true in other fields, but in science and engineering, some of the brightest kids from Asia, from India, China, Hong Kong, Korea, except Japan, went to the U.S. for their graduate study. And then the U.S. universities could not have maintained the quality of education, quality of programs without these bright kids from IITs and whatnot going to the U.S. And so in some ways, I say to universities in Korea that some of the universities, well-known universities here, have been a feeder school. Instead of being a university, they play the role of feeder school. So for Korean universities to develop, I said they got to stop doing that. And so if you go to Japan, you talked about University of Tokyo, they cannot get any Japanese students to come to the University of Tokyo for graduate study, just about. So if you go there, they are all students from Korea, China, and other countries. And then, in fact, the ones at the University of Tokyo are the ones who cannot come to KAIST, attending Tokyo and so forth. And that is a major problem of Japan, in that their own students don't go to their own graduate school. And at the same time, not too many foreign students want to come to Japan because of language problems. So they rather go to the US or England or someplace for their graduate study. So this kind of migration has made, I think, US university very strong. And one other thing that made US universities very strong is the fact that investment in the US was done selectively. Because of the defense needs, all the investment in R&D was done in select top 10 universities, 20 universities. And as a result, unlike the case of Europe, where, especially in Germany, France, and so forth, where they had this idea that all universities got to be treated equally alike, and therefore investment was distributed uniformly across the entire university system, it made them weaker because they could not compete with universities. When Defense Department supplied $50 million a year, every year for 30 years in computer science in 10 select universities, the result is invariably very strong computer science programs in the U.S. So that's the background, that's the backdrop of what happened in the past. I think the question that has to do with what we do in the future, I think will depend very much on what is the goal of education. So in my opinion, every institution and every country has to select their own goals. And I think I try to do that at KAIST, to select our own goal as to what KAIST should be like. And based on that, we made an investment, and based on that, we are charging ahead. And so goals and programs must be compatible, otherwise nothing will get done. And one of the things we have done at KAIST is that we introduced the same kind of tenure system that leading university in the U.S. has. So, for example, we just had a review of 35 people, 35 professors, and we denied tenure to 1/3 of them. So the 30-some% got to leave KAIST. And that was not done before here in Korea. Everybody wants to get a job, as you said. They stay there no matter what, right? They qualify once to be a professor, and then they are there a lifetime. And we changed the system. And so what that will do is they'll change the attitude of professors about what their role is. So that means they have to study, they have to work hard, and all that. And as I mean, so this tenure system is a brutal system. It's not a very good system. You know, I mean, after you work at the university for 20 years, if you're told to leave, that's a big shock. For anybody, it's a big shock. But anyway, that's what we did, and I'm not proud of it, but I think we had to do it. And as a way of rejuvenating the faculty, so they know that as a scholar, they have to work and work and work and work. That's what scholars are supposed to do. And so we've, and I think some of this, I guess one of the reasons we are at this forum, if I understand it correctly, I'm not really sure if I understand it correctly, but if I try to interpret, I think the message here is that we have diverse forum dealing with economy, money, and industry, and all those kind of things. And I think the message here is that ultimately what's most important is human resource. Human resource determines economy, determines technology, creates new science, and so on and so forth. So the question is, how should we deal with human resource issues when it's so important, and yet it does not get the due attention that it should be getting in many countries. So anyway, that was sort of my comment on what you said, and so I think it's a very important topic, and yet it's a mind-boggling topic because it's so broad, so many elements to this, and so forth. I guess this is a cereal pre-mix for you, right? So you better eat quick before it gets too soft. Huh? Okay, bon appetit.
Thank you.
여보세요? 이게 설탕이 들어간 시리얼에서 난 설탕을 못합니다. 네, 네. 그냥 설탕이 없는 건 괜찮아요. 콘플레이크만이에요. 네. I'm diabetic, and it's a little bit sweet, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So how do you find Korea? Do you find it interesting? Is it the first time for you, or
No, fifth time.
So when was the first time you came to Korea?
Last March.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So-
Relatively recently. Huh?
Yeah, relatively recently.
You know, Korea has gone through a major transformation. You must know. You must have been here.
I wasn't here before the crisis, so I've seen it only since the crisis.
Oh, I see. Okay. How about you? When was the first time you came here?
5 years ago, something like
I
that,
see.
5, 6 years ago.
So all post IMF crisis. It's a country that has gone through a great transition. And, you know, in 1950, when Korean War broke out, and after the war, there was nothing here, flat. This whole area that you are sitting here used to be a farm. It was not a major city like this. Only this all happened during the last, I would say, 30 years. And even Samsung, that you know so much about because they are DRAMs and whatnot, it's only Samsung Electronics is 37 years old. In that time, they built $100 billion company and became one of the leading companies in DRAMs and so forth, 37 years old. So here, the pace has been very fast, very fast.
And one was export driven, and Turkey was on self-sufficiency, you know, trying to substitute to
Cheap
import.
black tea.
And you see the result after 40 years, very big difference.
Yeah, big difference there. Actually, per capita income of Egypt in 1950 was greater than the per capita income of Korea. Did you know that?
Yeah, I worked in Egypt, so I used to tease them with that,
Yeah.
to remind them. They don't like this kind of stuff. But it's not only Egypt, it's Brazil, and it's many countries.
Yeah.
But also one of the things that happened is that with the crisis, you address some of the structural problems that caused the crisis.
Right,
I
right.
work a lot in Latin America, and there they haven't. Chile perhaps, but you know, Mexico, for example, they just took measures to overcome the crisis, but they didn't address the fundamental problems with their banking system.
I see. How about Brazil? Is it changing?
Brazil is also a big problem because they have the worst economic growth after Haiti, Latin America.
Is that right?
In that part of the world, they have 2.3 growth.
Then why is the stock market going up?
Strategy and it's striking to see how close they continue to be, and they don't have one thing I really like in Korea, and I think you find it in many Asian countries. They don't have this thirst to learn from the outside world. There is an element of complacency that they don't need to. And if you look at their university, they are very closed. And in fact, the best university, University of Sao Paulo, just decided that it would not be allowed anymore to write a doctoral thesis in English or in a language other than Portuguese.
We are going just the opposite way.
I know.
We are teaching all our freshman class in English. And we're increasing enrollment of international students. So now 7% of our freshman class, the first year, is students from other countries. Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin American countries and so forth, comes in. And we are trying to, we are really trying to make it global. So my hope is that in 10 years or so, KAIST will be a global institution, not a Korean institution. And that's the goal. And so we are hiring more professors from other countries. And I just made an offer to a professor in Denmark. And we have quite a few American professors now. And so we need to change. Because otherwise, the problem is, the biggest handicap I think Koreans have, when they go outside of Korea, they do encounter difficulties because of their linguistic problems. And I think we need to solve that. And so, when you cannot speak, you cannot participate in international arena. Business people do well. Business people, they have become global a long time ago. So but if you go away from business, then the globalization is not as extensive as it should be, especially in higher education. So, so when we decided to teach our freshmen in English, the ones who felt most uncomfortable were the professors. But after teaching it for one term, students liked it. So now professor cannot complain because students like it, right? So, but it is a burden for professors, right? They haven't spoken English for a long time, and all of a sudden, when you teach in English, that it's a burden. But we have enough professors who are fluent in English that it's not an issue. But there are some who are very uncomfortable with the whole idea that you have to stand up in front of Korean students and start teaching English, right? So, but anyway, that's the transition.
I went some lectures in Yonsei. And I was very surprised with the quality of English of people there, especially in the business school. And really the questions were interesting. They were really able to express themselves easily in English. So it was really interesting. But in the same university, when I gave a lecture to the design section,
Yeah, right.
it's something, well, I don't know if it will be one day as it is supposed to be, but it's just something
Actually,
extremely ambitious.
yeah, I had the same feeling, but but if you look at this area here, it's now a very modern city, right? Which used to be a farm 30 years ago. It was very cheap land. People who bought some land here all became very rich.
Yeah.
So from the project, in fact, KAIST will have a second campus near the international airport. The reason being that we need a campus where people from other countries can come in easily without having to drive within Korea. So if they're coming to Incheon International Airport from the States, from California is about 10 hours, from Europe is about roughly 10 hours, and then from Australia is 10 hours. So we figured that that's why we should have a campus. So we are establishing a campus there. And actually we have a very ambitious goal. We are putting we create a new office of EEWS. EEWS stands for Energy, Environment, Water, and Sustainability. And then this headquarters will be in the second campus, so that the people from other countries can work with us in dealing with this issue. These are multidisciplinary issues, so it requires all inputs from all disciplines. And so that's what we are planning to do there. So we got, it looks like we're going to get about 100 acres there, something like that. Huge piece of land to build a campus. So interesting.
Impressive, yeah. And do you plan to teach future study? Do you plan to teach future studies?
Exactly what we'll do there, but we are considering a number of things, and mostly related to the problems of the 21st century. I call it problems of humanity of the 21st century. So the question, what out of there are many others, but we chose EEWS. So we are not going to worry about healthcare, because we don't have medical school, and so although we'll be collaborating with the Seoul National University in that area, we ourselves don't have this. So we'll be just selecting these 4 areas.
The teaching of future studies, and the main problem was to find teachers in this field.
It is very hard, right?
Yeah, so they were she is considering right now to try to train local teachers, well, by foreigners mainly.
Actually, I don't know too many universities where they have the ability to deal with them.
Well, I think it's like in another country. You have first to train your own teachers, and then they will teach future studies. But
In the U.S., there are people who run a fairly substantial consulting business, and they go around.
this is about consulting, but I'm really speaking about teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Tamkam University in Korea, Taipei, campus of Tamshui. They have now some 3,000 students in the first level of undergraduate in future studies. The Future Studies Center. If you take Australia, Swinburne University, for example, and Shine Coast University also. They have many students in future study as well. It's now really spreading, so you could find even in this area of the world, not only in America. And you have Jim Dator in Hawaii, which is not so far from here.
I have a little note here saying we should go back to our main topic. I thought we were talking about our main topic here.
Teaching future studies is among the
Yeah.
it's part of the topic.
Anyway, one of the things that came out of Korean colloquium, there are roughly 25 people, mostly former and current presidents of universities. And we discussed this for 3 days. And conclusion there was that education must change, and then it will be difficult to have all universities to be the leading intellectual institutions that have the selective investment, and that the European universities must rethink about the way the resources are applied, and U.S. universities today are the strongest because of the investment made in the past. And I think the universities in Asia are trying to take the best part of what they see in other countries and come up with their own model. And but there are some elements of what you talked about where university professors, once they get a job, it was a lifetime job. But that's changing. I think it's going to change here, and it must change because the Korean university cannot be competitive under that system. So.
Well, in France we have developed several scenarios about the future of universities. In 3 of them, internationalization is really one of the solutions. I mean, from the point of view of the mobility of students, mobility of teachers, exchanges between universities, some common programs. And for example, in the case of the World Future Studies Federation, we are right now working with Finland Teachers Academy in order to try to create what would be World Futures Academy, bringing together several universities around the world from different countries and different systems in order to build a real curriculum in future studies, but curriculum that where you could be a student in, for example, in Seoul, and at the same time take courses in Finland and take courses in Hawaii and in France, for example, if you want to build your own curriculum that way. And I think that this kind of chosen itinerary within university could be something with an interesting future.
Yeah, one of the things.
Postgraduate.
Yeah, you talked about Songdo earlier. One of the requirements of government here, as we establish our campus there, is that we have to bring in international partners. So we cannot just have a KAIST, a Korean university there alone. They are asking us to develop programs with universities in other countries. In fact, they are demanding that some of the leading universities in finance in other countries, especially in the U.S., co-locate in the same campus with us. So that's one of the requirements, so we are working on it. And obviously it's not that easy because hard to have one of the universities in the U.S. have part of the faculty spend their time in Songdo, although it's nice, it will be a nice place, nevertheless it's quite a distance away from the U.S. But that's one of the requirements that we have to meet. So we are talking to a number of universities in Europe. We are talking to a number of universities in the U.S. So to have an international campus near the Incheon International Airport. And I think it's going to happen. And obviously the question is how much, what's the price for having their participation? And but the thing is the demand for education here is so great that I think that we'll have a fairly substantial number of students enrolled in this, paying fairly high tuition. And so that, I think, is the way it's going to go in Korea. That is, many of the Korean universities will globalize. And it seems there's no other choice to compete. Companies compete internationally, right?
Definitely.
And universities got to compete internationally. And someday, politics got to be internationalized too, right? And I gave a talk on globalization a few months ago, and I said, business in Korea is about 100% globalized. And universities are about, I said, somewhere between 50 to 80% globalized. Politics has a zero globalization. So, I think that's true in many countries. Eh? Politics is local.
Definitely local.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps some world government. Who knows?
World Bank clearly is a global institution, right? Although you don't play much of a role in advanced countries. Right?
No, we.
So, how do you see in Europe, let's say in Europe, higher education developing in the future? Forget about the details, but in the big picture. How do you think universities in Europe will evolve? Is it going to be more or less the way it is now? I know Germans now are changing their universities, so they'll have bachelor's degree, master's, and so forth.
Only Europe.
Everywhere.
It is, yes, it is a Bologna process.
Okay.
Only
So
Europe.
that's sort of like now becoming the close to American system, I guess. So other than that, what other changes do you see in Europe taking place? Do you see this concentrated investment in few select universities on a competitive basis? That I think is a key to.
But Germany has this excellence initiative, so they want
they're
to move in
building
that
that,
direction.
right, yeah.
Denmark also is moving in that direction. I think it was interesting in France, the debate, if I may, as an outsider, but the debates about autonomy last summer, where the proposal of the government was to establish it on a competitive basis. So universities would volunteer, and then they would get additional resources. But there was a negative reaction, and as a result, now they have to be all the same.
You must know that France is, I think, one of the very few countries in the world who has rejected the private university. So we have had only one, and I don't know if I can still say that we have one, which is Université Léonard de Vinci in Paris. And well, when I'm teaching, I'm not professor because I'm not paid by the government, by the Ministry of Education, but I'm teaching for now 22 years, so it's a long time. And I have been warned by my university that I shouldn't accept to teach in this university.
Is that right?
Oh yes, it is. And most of my colleagues has been warned the same way. So it has been rejected with such a kind of hate. I mean, it's something very deep inside. I think it's something about, we made the revolution in order to win some democratization, to fight against elitism or things like that. still it's a very paradoxical system because we have still very elitist schools like the grandes écoles.
Some of them are private.
Grandes écoles? No,
Yeah.
they are all, no.
Well,
They're not private, they have special status,
Yeah.
but they are paid by state. As long as you are financed by state, well.
Yeah, but not as high because the fees are much higher than in the rest of the.
For the high school, no.
Yeah,
But
I
for the
remember.
grand
I went to ESSEC and I had to pay much
ESSEC
more
is
than.
not a grand école, it's a private school from the Chamber of Commerce system with HEC.
Yeah.
Well,
They are
it's
not
a
the
business
engineering
school, it's
school,
really
but
a
they're
business
still-
school.
yeah.
Yes, we have business school, it's just, not to say it is not grand école. As it is called, it's only NA Central.
I spent 1 week at the university in Paris. It's a technical university, and that's right at the center of Paris. And then they also had a campus in Aix-en-Provence, and so I went there and I gave lectures. I taught for a week, and the impression I got there was that the school needed a lot more investment in the facilities. Am I correct? I haven't gone through all the universities. I only went to one. And is that true of other universities?
Definitely. I think we have a deep lack of funding for public universities, well, current universities. The only place where you can find
Well, I mean, did not France say Switzerland?
Switzerland,
Yeah.
it's a local issue.
right? Very good schools, very advanced, very good facilities and all that. So somehow Swiss is sort of isolated case, I guess.
Well, it's also because they have a much higher level of living than ours.
Oh, I see.
Swiss is still, as long as, well, Pierre-Alain will tell it better than me, but it is still the richest country of Europe.
Luxembourg is the
Luxembourg, yeah, okay. Is Luxembourg a country? Well, I just want to go
They're building at the university.
Yes, that's right. I want them, so, well, it's a really, really rich country, and they have always invested in education, mainly in what you would call college, and mainly for, I would say, for rich people, sending their children in, how you call it, in boarding, pension.
Perhaps for boarding school.
I see,
Boarding
right, sure.
schools, yes. So it was a service for them. I mean, it was kind of export service.
So I guess one of the conclusions we are drawing up here, I think one important conclusion that we are all coming to is that investment in education is most important thing, first of all, right?
Clear.
Would you agree with that?
Definitely.
Okay, so money counts, right? And investment. And given that there's not enough money to go around, then the second conclusion is that one has to be selective in investment. Do you agree with that?
I agree for a research university, for the top universities,
Right,
but at the same time you need also
Mass education, right.
for through
Right.
community colleges,
Right,
open and
I agree with that,
universities.
I agree with that, right. So if you say there are 3 tiers of universities, one is mass education system, colleges and whatnot, and then the special schools, like law schools, medical schools and so forth. And then there's a third class would be research universities.
Yes.
And so for research universities, then I think the second conclusion is that there ought to be selective massive investment. Otherwise, the universities cannot compete and cannot fulfill their responsibility as a societal institution. So that part we agree, right?
Yeah.
So third conclusion that I see is that universities cannot continue to be on current path because of the issues you mentioned, that this idea of having a professor who's acting like an emperor, having 100 graduate students and then they're not studying and then just being a manager. You know, when you have so many graduate students, then you become a manager. You are not a scholar anymore, right? And that system cannot last. That's the second conclusion. And then the fourth conclusion that I guess we are drawing is that technology has a role to play, but so far its effect has been somewhat minimal. Still, most people prefer to teach an old style. stand in front of students and just lecture. And then we are saying that ought to change. Technology should play a role, but it's not playing as big a role as perhaps it should have played. And in the future, clearly technology ought to have a bigger role in education, although sometimes it's hard to tell what exactly that ought to be. And I mentioned Google because it turns out to be a very useful thing. You don't have to look up dictionary anymore, right? Encyclopedia is gone now. Okay?
So final conclusion is that policies matter in this field. So
Right,
the government has a role in
That's very
designing
important.
policies.
Quality control is important because you go to Google and you can get a lot of
Garbage,
you
right?
can get a lot of
Right.
A lot of
So
trash
Right,
also.
right.
Look at Wikipedia, for example, it's
Yeah.
very unequal.
Right.
So to
Right.
teach our children to use Google in an intelligent way, I think is also very important.
Thank you very much. That's also.
Same with you,
I-
so
Okay.
I'm agreeing with you.
It's my pleasure to have met you.
Yes, thank you very much. And
I'll see
I
you
hope you will
again,
attend my session A5 with Fabienne.
Yes.
Right.
1:30 this afternoon.
Yes,
My pleasure.
hope to.
Or job or going over for the. Sure. Yeah, let me give you my cards here. I used to have a lot of friends at work. Please. So,
I thought you are in the same position as
okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
have good sessions and then hopefully I'll see you sometime during the day. I'll be in a 10:30 C session, session C.
Welcome in session A5 in case of.
All right.
you will learn more.
Yes.
Okay, we'll see you then.
See you, bye-bye.
On va revoir dans la journée alors.
Oui.
Plaisir.
Let me give you my card.
Oh, thank you.
I'd like to send you something. I'm working on this concept of world-class universities
Sure, yeah.
and how to get that. If so, I would like to send to you. If you have any comments.
Sure.
But also, if I'd love to write a box on KAIST.
Yeah,
If you can send me some material.
sure, I'll talk to you sometime about that.
Okay.
What we're doing. And it's 37 years old.
I know, no,
Yeah,
I'm
so,
familiar with it.
It has done a lot for Korea.
Mhm.
And,
How long have you been the president?
15 months.
Okay, and there was a U.S. president before that, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, he didn't work too well.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that. I was at MIT until, yeah.
And what's your field?
I'm a mechanical engineer. So, yeah, but we do all kinds of different things. Yeah. Yeah, so,
Well, I'd love to stay in touch, and I'll send you this
yeah,
article.
right. Yeah, if you have a time, you combine. Sure. To KAIST. Have you been there?
No, I've been to POSCO graduate school.
Okay, KAIST is only 2 hours away by car. I can send you a car to pick you up, so you can come down. And then by high-speed train.
Where are you?
It's in a science city. It's a science called Daedong, and it's middle of the country. And by car it's 2 hours. By high-speed train it's 55 minutes. So if you
Next time, I'd love to come.
Yeah, if you come down, just let me know, okay? And we can pick you up at the airport or something. And then, actually, it's a very good school.
No, it has.
Very, very bright kids. Because we get our students from science high school. 70% of our undergraduates from science high school. And to get into science high school is you have to be pretty good because they select maybe 100 kids out of a population pool of 100,000. So it's hard to get in. And we get top 30% of those from the science high school. So in terms of quality of students, I think we can compare very favorably with the best in the world.
No, I think that institutions like yours, like the IITs in India, are even more selective than MIT or...
Much more selective. So, but, in graduate school universities, they don't have to try very hard to get students from other countries. But in the case of KAIST, we are working on it, and I think it'll change, because we get now a large number of students from Vietnam, and so I think it's going to change. So I'm very hopeful. Yeah, I think KAIST will be one of the best. I think it'll be one of the best in 10 years. Yeah. So that's a time, that's how long it's going to take.